The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation Council stretched high above like a crystal cathedral. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the floating seats that hung in the air without any support. Ambassador Hyun-Ki sat in the small, human section, his dark suit looking plain next to the shining scales and glowing skin of other delegates. He kept his face calm, even though anger burned in his chest. Commander Tae-jin stood behind Hyun-Ki with his hands behind his back. His military uniform was simple and gray, nothing like the flowing robes and energy shields worn by alien commanders. Tae-jin watched every face in the room, reading their expressions like a hunter tracking prey. He had fought in 3 wars before humans ever met other species. Now these aliens wanted to tell Earth how to fight. The speaker of the council was a tall blue creature called Vexthon. Its voice echoed through the hall without any sound system. "The motion before us today is clear," Vexthon said. "Should humanity be banned from joining the Void War against the Devourers?" Dr. Sora sat in the corner taking notes on her tablet. She was Earth's best expert on alien life forms. Her job was to understand how other species thought and acted. Right now she was watching something interesting. Many of the aliens who spoke loudest against humans kept looking away when they talked about human violence. Fear, she thought. They are scared of us. The first speaker was Grexthar from the Vorthak Empire. He was huge and covered in thick armor that grew from his skin. His forearms moved as he talked, making grand gestures. "Humans are too violent," he said. "They fight with anger instead of logic. In the last war between the Terran Alliance and the hegemony, humans used nuclear weapons on their own planet." "What species does that?" Several aliens made sounds of agreement. The crystalline Zarians chimed like broken glass. The gas-based Nephilim changed colors from calm blue to worried yellow. A small creature that looked like a walking tree rustled its leaves in what humans had learned was laughter. "They are primitive," added Silvara from the Nexus Union. She floated in a bubble of water, her tentacles waving slowly. "Human ships still use projectile weapons, metal bullets and explosive shells. How can such backward technology help against the Devourers?" More laughter filled the hall. Hyun-Ki felt his jaw tighten but kept quiet. These aliens had weapons that could bend space and time. They had shields that could stop anything. They thought human guns were toys. Commander Tae-jin stepped forward. The council speaker nodded for him to talk. "Respected delegates," Tae-jin said in a steady voice. "You say we are violent and primitive. You are right. Humans have fought each other for thousands of years. We have made terrible weapons and used them on our own kind. But we are still here. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have ended other species. Maybe our violence is not weakness. Maybe it is strength." A small alien with 6 eyes laughed. "Strength? You almost destroyed yourselves with your own bombs. You polluted your oceans and cut down your forests. If we had not found you when we did, you would be extinct." Dr. Sora looked up from her notes. She had studied the histories of every species in the Federation. Most of them had peaceful childhoods on perfect worlds. They developed technology slowly and carefully. They never faced real danger until they met other species. Humans were different. Earth had tried to kill humanity since the beginning. Every generation faced some new threat. Humans learned to adapt or die. The debate went on for hours. Delegate after delegate spoke against allowing humans to fight. They called humans unstable, emotional, and dangerous. Some said human soldiers could not be trusted to follow orders. Others worried that humans would commit war crimes against the Devourers. "The Devourers are an ancient evil," said High Counselor Velnara. She was tall and thin, with skin that glowed like starlight. "They have consumed entire star systems. This war requires careful planning and advanced technology. Human chaos will only make things worse." Hyun-Ki finally stood up. The hall became quiet. Even the air circulation system seemed to stop. "May I speak?" he asked. The speaker nodded. "The human delegate may address the council." Hyun-Ki walked to the center of the hall. Every eye, sensor, and awareness was focused on him. He looked around at the hundreds of species that filled the chamber. Some were beautiful beyond description. Others were so alien that human minds could barely understand their form. All of them thought they were better than humanity. "You call us violent," Hyun-Ki said. "You are right. You call us primitive. You are right about that too. You say we are emotional and unpredictable. Right again. But you have made one mistake in your judgment of humanity." He paused and looked directly at Grexthar. "You think these things make us weak. In your perfect worlds with your perfect technologies, violence and chaos seem like flaws. But the Devourers are not like anything you have faced before. They do not follow your rules. They do not fight your careful battles. They are hunger given form, and hunger does not care about your logic." A murmur went through the crowd. Some aliens shifted in their seats. Dr. Sora saw fear in their body language again. They knew Hyun-Ki was right about something, even if they did not want to admit it. "Humans have fought the impossible and won," Hyun-Ki continued. "We have beaten enemies with better weapons, better numbers, and better positions. We do this because we refuse to accept defeat. When your computer tells you the battle cannot be won, you retreat. When our computer tells us the battle cannot be won, we throw the computer away and fight anyway." Grexthar stood up, his massive frame blocking the light from above. "Pretty words, human. But words do not win wars. The Devourers have destroyed fleets 10 times larger than your entire military. They have weapons that can crack planets. They have ships that can phase through matter itself. What can your primitive bullets do against that?" Hyun-Ki smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "I do not know, but I would like the chance to find out." The vote came quickly after that. Species after species voted to ban humans from the war. The final count was overwhelming. Only 3 species voted with Earth, and they were small powers with little influence. As the session ended and aliens began to leave, Hyun-Ki remained standing in the center of the hall. Taijin and Sora joined him. They watched the delegates float away on their platforms and energy fields. "They are afraid," Sora said quietly. "Not of the Devourers, of us." "Good," Taijin replied. "Fear means respect." Hyun-Ki looked up at the empty speaker's platform. "When the Devourers come," he said, loud enough for the remaining delegates to hear, "and they will come in numbers you cannot imagine, remember this moment. Remember that you chose pride over survival. Remember that you sent away the only species in this galaxy that has never learned how to surrender." The 3 humans walked out together, leaving the great hall silent behind them. Above Earth, human warships waited in orbit, their weapons powered down but ready. Soon those ships would be needed, whether the Galactic Federation wanted them or not. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Federation banned humans from the Void War. General Kyung-ho stood in the command center deep beneath Seoul, watching holographic displays show the battle raging at the edge of the Centauri Nebula. Beside him, Admiral Yeon-Soo tracked Federation fleet movements through encrypted signals their allies still shared in secret. The alien fleets were magnificent to watch. 4-THAC battleships moved in perfect geometric patterns, their energy weapons firing in synchronized waves that lit up space like deadly fireworks. Zerion crystal ships phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy lines to strike, before vanishing again. Nephilim gas-form vessels flowed around obstacles like living clouds, their weapon beams bending through dimensions that human science barely understood. "Beautiful," Yeon-Soo said, but her voice was cold. "And completely predictable." The Federation commanders followed their battle plans exactly. When Devourer ships approached from the left, the aliens moved right in calculated formations. When the enemy attacked in waves, the Federation responded with counter-waves, timed to mathematical precision. Every move was logical, efficient, and, based on thousands of years of military science, the Devourers adapted to every tactic within hours. Captain Da-Eun watched from the bridge of her stealth ship Soul's Shadow. She had violated direct orders to stay in the Sol system, but her ship was invisible to most sensors and fast enough to escape if discovered. Her crew of 20 had volunteered for this unauthorized mission, knowing they could face court-martial if caught. "Captain," her censor officer Jinwoo called out, "the Federation's Third Fleet is taking heavy losses. They are maintaining formation even as their flagship breaks apart." Dayun studied the tactical display. The alien admiral kept his ships in perfect battle formation while devourer creatures tore through his lines. When casualties reached 30%, the Federation fleet began an organized retreat. Not a panicked run, but a careful withdrawal with covering fire and predetermined rally points. The devourers let them go. They did not chase the retreating ships or try to finish them off. Instead, they seemed to study the Federation tactics, learning from each encounter. On Earth, engineer Wanho worked in the orbital shipyard above the Pacific Ocean. His job was maintaining human warships, but he spent most of his time reading secret messages from Federation survivors. The messages came through hidden channels, sent by aliens who were beginning to doubt their leaders' strategies. One message came from a Xerion crystal being named Fluxara. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. "The Devourers do not just attack our ships," it said. "They attack our minds. They broadcast thoughts that make our battle computers freeze. They send signals that cause our crew to make mistakes. Our logical thinking has become our weakness." Wanho shared this message with Dr. Sora, who had returned to Earth after the council vote. She studied it in her laboratory filled with alien artifacts and biological samples. "Psychological warfare," she said to Wanho during their video call. "The Devourers are not just consuming matter and energy. They are consuming thought patterns. The more organized and logical a species thinks, the easier it becomes for them to predict and counter their actions." Back at the Nebula battle, the war was going badly for the Federation. Admiral Grixton of the Federal Navy commanded the largest fleet ever assembled. 2 million ships from 47 species, armed with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They should have been unstoppable. Instead, they were being systematically destroyed. The Devourers did not fight like any enemy the Federation had faced. They did not use tactics from any known military doctrine. They seemed to flow like water, around every defense, always appearing where they were least expected. When the Federation set up kill zones, the Devourers avoided them. When they created choke points, the enemy found new routes. When they used their most powerful weapons, the Devourers simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Seo Jin from the Soul's Shadow, "I am detecting some kind of broadcast from the Devourer fleet. It is not in any language we know, but our computer is trying to translate it. The translation came through broken and incomplete, but some phrases were clear. Predictable patterns, consume order, feed on logic." The Devourers were not just fighting the Federation. They were hunting specific types of thinking. Captain Dayun realized something that made her blood run cold. "They are not trying to win quickly," she said to her crew. "They are learning. Every battle teaches them more about how logical minds work. They are turning our greatest strength against us." On Earth, the human military watched their allies die while being forbidden to help. General Kyung-ho paced in his command center, like a caged tiger. "We could break through their lines in a week," he said to Admiral Yeon-su. "Human tactics would confuse them because we do not think like the others." "Maybe that is exactly why they banned us," Yeon-su replied. "Not because we are primitive, but because we are the only species that might actually win." The Battle of the Nexus Gate lasted 18 hours and ended in disaster for the Federation. 3 fleets were completely destroyed. The survivors retreated to the inner systems, leaving the outer colonies defenseless. Refugee ships filled with civilians fled toward the galactic core while Devourer scouts followed like sharks sensing blood. Engineer Wanho received more secret messages, these ones desperate and terrified. Xerion cities were going dark as their crystal networks were consumed. Vorthak worlds reported their military computers shutting down for no reason. The gas beings of the Nephilim found their group consciousness being invaded by alien thoughts that drove their members insane. The worst message came from a young Spiral Commonwealth pilot named Torbeth. "They are in our heads," the message said. "The Devourers do not just eat our ships, they eat our thoughts. When we think about tactics, they know what we will do. When we plan attacks, they are already defending. When we try to retreat, they are waiting for us. Only chaos defeats them, but we do not know how to be chaotic. We only know order. Dr. Sora studied this message for hours. She had spent years learning how different alien species thought and reasoned. Most of them were far more logical than humans. They made decisions based on careful analysis and mathematical probability. They avoided unnecessary risks and emotional responses. These traits had made them successful as civilizations. Now these same traits were getting them killed. Colonel Minho arrived at Sora's lab carrying classified files about Devourer battle patterns. He was Earth's head of military intelligence, a man who had spent his career studying how enemies think and fight. "Look at this," he said, spreading holographic charts across her desk. "Every time the Federation tries something new, the Devourers counter it within hours. But look at these random events: equipment failures, communication errors, pilots who panicked and broke formation. In those cases, the Devourers were slower to respond. Sometimes they seemed confused." Sora studied the data. "Chaos disrupts their ability to predict," she said. "They feed on patterns, but human thinking is naturally chaotic. We make decisions based on emotion, instinct, and pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. That is exactly what they cannot consume." The two of them realized something that would change everything. Humanity's greatest weaknesses, according to the Federation, emotion, unpredictability, and violent aggression, might be their greatest weapons against the Devourers. But Earth remained banned from the war, and the Federation was too proud to admit they had made a mistake. Meanwhile, more worlds fell silent every day as the ancient enemy grew stronger, learning from each victory how to consume the galaxy's ordered minds. In space, Captain Daeun's stealth ship continued its unauthorized patrol, recording everything, for the day when humanity would finally be allowed to fight back. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Hyun-Ki sat in the Human Observer section, watching alien delegates rush into the Great Hall with panic written across every face, tentacle, and energy field. The news from the war front had shattered their confidence completely. 70% casualties across 12 major battles. The Vorthak homeworld had gone silent 3 days ago, its massive defense fleets simply vanishing from all sensors. The crystal cities of Zirion flickered and died one by one, as something consumed their light from within. Spiral Commonwealth colonies reported their entire populations disappearing overnight, leaving behind only empty buildings and the echo of screams. High Counselor Velnara stood at the speaker's platform, her starlight skin dim and flickering. "The situation is critical," she announced to the packed chamber. "Devourer forces have increased by 300% since the war began. They are not just attacking our worlds. They are learning from each victory, growing stronger and more intelligent with every battle." Commander Taejin stood behind Hyun-Ki, his military bearing unchanged despite the chaos around them. He watched alien officers who had once mocked human discipline now stumble into the hall with tears streaming down their faces. Some shook uncontrollably. Others stared at nothing with dead eyes that had seen too much horror. Delegate Morthex, of the Spiral Commonwealth, was the first to break. The tall, graceful being who had once laughed at human violence now fell to his knees in the center of the hall. "My people are gone," he sobbed. "All of them. The Devourers did not just kill them. They consumed their thoughts, their memories, their very souls. Our children's last moments were broadcast across space as a warning to others." Dr. Sora took careful notes as more delegates shared their losses. The pattern was becoming clear. The Devourers were not random destroyers. They targeted species based on how predictably they thought. The more logical and organized a civilization was, the faster it fell. Grexthar, the massive Vorthak warrior who had led the campaign to ban humans, entered the hall supported by 2 smaller aliens. His armor was cracked and burned. One of his 4 arms hung useless at his side. "The 10th battle fleet is gone," he said in a broken voice. 5 million ships, the pride of our empire, destroyed in 6 hours. The Devourers knew every move we would make before we made it. They countered strategies we had not even decided to use yet. Admiral Grixton limped to the speaking platform. The Federal Navy's Supreme Commander looked like he had aged decades in the past month. "They are inside our battle computers," he reported. "Every time we calculate an attack plan, they seem to receive the data instantly. Our most secure networks have been compromised by something that should not be able to exist in normal space." Hyun-Ki listened to the reports with growing understanding. The Devourers were not just physically consuming the galaxy. They were eating the very concept of logical thought, turning the aliens' greatest strength into their fatal weakness. Silvara from the Nexus Union floated in her water bubble, but the liquid was murky with her fear chemicals. "Our probability matrices are useless," she said through her translator. "Every calculation we make seems to help them predict our actions. The more we think, the more we help them kill us." Colonel Min-ho had arrived from Earth that morning with classified intelligence reports. He sat beside Dr. Sora, sharing data through their secure connection. "The Devourers are not just fighting a war," he whispered. "They are conducting an experiment. They are testing the limits of logical thought patterns across different species." A small crystalline being from the Zerian collective spoke next. Its voice was barely audible, a faint chiming that the translation systems had trouble processing. "Our hive mind is fragmenting," it said. "The Devourers broadcast thoughts that cause our crystals to resonate at destructive frequencies. Our shared consciousness is being used against us. Unity has become our doom." The hall erupted into chaos as more species shared similar reports. The gas beings of the Nephilim described their group consciousness being invaded by alien thoughts that drove their members to madness. The machine intelligence of the Synth Collective reported their quantum processors being corrupted by paradox equations that should not exist. Dr. Ji-hyun, Earth's leading combat psychologist, had been studying Federation battle recordings for months. She stood up in the observer section and raised her hand. "May I address the council?" she asked. The speaker looked uncertain. Humans were not supposed to participate in these sessions, but with the galaxy dying around them, old rules seemed less important. "The human observer may speak." Ji-hyun walked to the center of the hall, her simple Earth uniform looking plain among the exotic alien dress. "You are fighting the wrong war," she said clearly. "The Devourers are not just consuming matter and energy. They are consuming thought patterns. Specifically, they feed on logical, predictable thinking. Every species in this room thinks in organized patterns that can be analyzed and countered." A Spiral Commonwealth delegate stood up angrily. "Are you saying our intelligence is weakness?" I'm saying your type of intelligence is exactly what they hunt," Ji-hyun replied. "Humans think differently. We make decisions based on emotion, instinct, and experiences that logic cannot fully explain. We are chaos given form, and chaos cannot be predicted or consumed in the same way." Grexthar struggled to his feet. "You want us to become like you, violent and unpredictable?" "I want you to survive," Ji-hyun said simply. "But you banned the one species that might actually be able to help you do that." The debate that followed was unlike anything the council had seen before. Delegates who had once been calm and rational screamed at each other across the hall. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for desperate last stands that everyone knew were hopeless. A few suggested fleeing to other galaxies, abandoning billions of civilians to their fate. Through it all, Hyun-Ki sat quietly in the observer section, watching the aliens tear themselves apart with the same logical thinking that the Devourers exploited. They could not help themselves. Even facing extinction, they tried to find rational solutions to an irrational problem. News arrived during the session that made everything worse. The Devourer fleet had tripled in size overnight. Scout ships reported massive constructs being built from the consumed remains of Federation vessels. The enemy was not just growing stronger, they were evolving. High Counselor Velnara collapsed at her podium, her starlight skin going completely dark. "We are going to lose," she said in a voice filled with despair. "All our technology, all our knowledge, all our civilizations, they will consume everything we are and everything we have ever been." The session ended in chaos as delegates fled the hall. Some were openly weeping. Others had shut down completely, their minds unable to process the scale of the disaster. A few species representatives simply vanished, teleporting or phase-shifting, a way to spend their final days with their families. Yun-Ki remained seated as the hall emptied. Commander Tae-jin and Dr. Sora joined him in the silence that followed. "They still will not ask for our help," Sora observed. "Pride is stronger than survival instinct even now." "Not pride," Tae-jin corrected. "Fear. They are more afraid of us than they are of the Devourers. At least they understand what the Devourers want to do to them." Yun-Ki stood up slowly and looked around the empty hall. Somewhere in the depths of space, 47 worlds had 6 days before the Devourer fleets reached them. Billions of civilians were about to die because their leaders could not admit they had made a mistake. "They will ask eventually," he said quietly. "When there is nowhere left to run and nothing left to lose, they will remember that humans have never learned how to surrender. The question is whether they will ask before or after there is anything left to save." Above them, hidden in the shadows of the Great Hall's ceiling, Captain Da-Yun's stealth ship recorded everything. Her unauthorized presence had become an open secret, but no one had the authority or energy to stop her anymore. The recordings would be sent to Earth, where human military planners waited for the call they knew must come. The galaxy was dying, and only the species it had rejected might be able to save it. The secret transmission reached Earth at 3 in the morning, Seoul time. Fleet Admiral Chang Min was awakened in his quarters by the urgent chiming of his personal communicator. The message was encrypted with codes that officially did not exist, sent through channels that were supposed to be impossible to access. Admiral Grixton's image appeared on the holographic display, but the proud Federation commander looked broken. His uniform was torn and his face showed exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. "Admiral Chang Min," he said quietly, "I am contacting you through unofficial channels, because official channels no longer exist. The Federation Council has been evacuated from Nexus Prime. The Devourers will reach the core worlds in 6 days." Chang Min listened without expression as Grixton continued. "We cannot officially rescind the ban on human participation. Too many species would revolt against their own governments. But there is a legal provision for independent mercenary actions during extreme emergencies. If human forces were to act as mercenaries without Federation authorization, we could not stop you." The transmission ended with coordinates for the Kepler 44-2 system, where Federation survivors were making their last stand. Chang Min sat in his darkened quarters for exactly 30 seconds, then began making calls. Within 6 hours, every human warship in the Sol system was moving. The fleet that assembled was smaller than what the Federation could field, but it carried the concentrated fury of a species that had spent 3 months watching its allies die while being forbidden to help. Captain Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship Incheon, watching the other ships take formation around him. Unlike the sleek, graceful vessels favored by alien species, human ships looked like they were built for war. Angular hulls bristled with weapons that fired solid projectiles alongside energy beams. Armor plating covered every surface, scarred, from battles that had taught humanity hard lessons about survival. Lieutenant Seo-jin worked at the tactical station, coordinating with the other ships in the fleet. Her displays showed vessels named after Earth's greatest military stands. The battleship Stalingrad carried enough firepower to level a continent. The heavy cruiser Thermopylae was built like a fortress that could take incredible punishment and keep fighting. The destroyer Alamo was fast and deadly, designed to strike hard and escape before the enemy could respond. Sergeant Bae Young commanded the Marine units aboard the Incheon. Her soldiers were equipped with weapons that alien species considered primitive: projectile firearms, explosive charges, and edged weapons for close combat. What the aliens did not understand was that these simple weapons worked in situations where advanced technology failed. Chief Engineer Yuna monitored the ship's systems from her position in the engine room. She had spent months modifying human weapons with configurations that violated several alien scientific principles. Particle beams that pulsed at random intervals, projectile weapons that fired rounds with unpredictable trajectories, shield generators that changed frequency and patterns based on human emotion rather than mathematical sequences. The journey to Kepler 442 took 18 hours through hyperspace. During the trip, the human crews prepared for battle in ways that would have horrified their alien allies. Instead of meditation and logical preparation, they told stories of past victories against impossible odds. They sang songs about soldiers who had died fighting enemies they could not defeat. They sharpened blades and loaded weapons while talking about home and the people they were fighting to protect. Captain Da-Yun brought her stealth ship Soul's Shadow out of hiding to join the main fleet. Her unauthorized reconnaissance had given Human Command detailed intelligence about Devourer tactics and Federation weaknesses. She knew exactly what they were facing. The Kepler 442 system was a graveyard when the human fleet arrived. Broken alien ships drifted through space like metallic corpses. Some still had their running lights on, their crews either dead or trapped inside. The few Federation survivors had gathered around the system's fourth planet, using its gravity well as a defensive position. Commander Subin aboard the destroyer Gwangju was the first to engage the enemy. Her ship dropped out of hyperspace directly into a formation of Devourer scouts, her weapons already firing before the aliens knew she was there. The Devourers expected logical approach patterns and carefully planned attacks. Instead, they got human aggression and the willingness to take insane risks. The main Devourer fleet was massive beyond anything the Federation had faced. Hundreds of ships that seemed to be grown rather than built, their hulls pulsing with captured energy from consumed worlds. At the center was a construct the size of a small moon, broadcasting the psychic patterns that had driven so many alien crews to madness. Fleet Admiral Chang Min gave the order that would define the battle. All ships, attack pattern chaos. Do not follow predetermined routes. Do not maintain formation. Fight like humans. What happened next violated every principle of space warfare that aliens understood. Instead of organized battle lines, human ships scattered across the system like angry wasps. Each captain made independent decisions based on instinct and opportunity rather than central planning. When Devourer forces moved to counter one attack, 3 more struck from unexpected directions. Pilot Jinsu flew his fighter directly into the psychic broadcaster, ignoring the mental assault that would have paralyzed an alien mind. Human brains, shaped by millions of years of violence and chaos, simply processed the attack as another form of background noise. Jinsu's ship disintegrated as it hit the alien construct, but the explosion disrupted their psychic coordination for critical minutes. Major Heiwan led boarding parties onto Devourer vessels using tactics that made no sense to logical minds. Instead of securing strategic positions, her Marines moved through the alien ships like a virus, destroying everything they found without any apparent pattern. The Devourers had learned to counter organized attacks, but they could not predict or counter pure destructive chaos. The turning point came when Captain Sion Ho of the heavy cruiser Pusan made a decision that should have been suicide. Instead of protecting his ship's reactor core during a massive Devourer assault, he deliberately overloaded it, while his ship was surrounded by enemy vessels. Military doctrine said the resulting explosion would destroy his own ship, along with the enemy's. Human engineering said otherwise. Chief Engineer Park Min had modified the Pusan's reactor with explosive bolts that could separate the core in exactly 1.3 seconds. The overload created an unstable wormhole that tore through the Devourer command formation, but the ship's escape pods launched just before the explosion, carrying the crew to safety on automated systems. The Devourers, who had learned to predict every logical response, had no answer for deliberate self-destruction that somehow became survival. Their coordination broke down as human tactics shattered every pattern they had learned to exploit. Throughout the battle, Communications Officer Yujin aboard the command ship Busan recorded everything. Her cameras captured images that would become legendary. Human pilots ramming their fighters into enemies 10 times their size. Marine units fighting through alien corridors with weapons that had not changed in centuries. And captains making split-second decisions based on nothing more than instinct and determination. The battle lasted 14 hours and cost the human fleet 60% of its ships. But when the shooting stopped, the massive Devourer fleet was broken. Their moon-sized command ship drifted dead in space, its psychic broadcast replaced by silence. For the first time since the war began, the ancient enemy had been not just defeated, but completely destroyed. In the aftermath, Federation survivors emerged from their hiding places around the planet. They stared in shock at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable devourer fleet. Many of them had never seen human ships before, and they could barely believe that such primitive-looking vessels had accomplished what their advanced fleets could not. Captain Dong Hyun received a transmission from Admiral Grixton, who had watched the entire battle from his damaged command ship. "How?" the alien admiral asked simply. "You fight to minimize losses," Dong Hyun replied. "We fight to win no matter what it costs." The devourers learned to consume logical thought, but they never learned to consume madness. The news of the victory spread through the galaxy faster than light, carried by quantum communication networks that the Federation had thought were compromised. In the Galactic Council chamber, delegates who had been planning their final evacuations stopped and stared at the reports coming in from Kepler 4042. Ambassador Hyun-Ki was summoned to an emergency session within hours. As he walked into the great hall, he saw something he had never seen before. Alien delegates rising to their feet as he entered. The same beings who had mocked human primitiveness now looked at him with expressions he recognized as awe and desperate hope. High Counselor Velnara stood at the speaker's platform, her starlight skin bright for the first time in weeks. "The Council wishes to officially rescind the ban on human military participation," she announced. "We request immediate assistance from the Terran Alliance in prosecuting the remainder of the Void War." Hyun-Ki walked to the center of the hall, just as he had months ago when they had rejected humanity. This time, no one laughed. No one called humans prim. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled, every delegate present either in person or through holographic projection. The massive chamber that had once echoed with debate and discussion was now silent as a tomb. At the center of the hall, a single holographic projector waited to show footage that would change how the galaxy understood warfare forever. Ambassador Hyun-Ki stood beside the projector, his simple human clothing dark against the brilliant lights of the alien technology around him. Commander Tae-jin and Dr. Sora flanked him, representing the military and scientific minds that had finally been allowed to serve alongside their allies. The footage they were about to show had been recorded by Communications Officer Yu Jin during the Battle of Kepler 442, and every frame had been verified by independent Federation observers. High Counselor Velnara activated the projection system with a gesture of her glowing hand. "The Council will now review the complete battle footage from the Kepler 442 engagement," she announced. "This record has been submitted by the Terran Alliance as evidence of human military capabilities." The lights dimmed and space filled the air above the delegates. They saw the Devourer fleet as it had appeared to the arriving human ships, hundreds of massive vessels that pulsed with consumed energy, their hulls grown from the bones of dead worlds. At the center, the moon-sized command construct broadcast its psychic assault across the system, the same type of mental attack that had driven so many alien crews to madness or suicide. The first shock came when the human ships appeared on screen. Unlike the graceful, artistic vessels favored by Federation species, the human warships looked brutal and functional. Scarred armor plates covered angular hulls that bristled with weapons both primitive and advanced. The contrast was jarring. Where alien ships looked like works of art that happened to carry weapons, human ships looked like weapons that happened to carry crews. Captain Dong Hyun's voice came through the speakers as he gave the order that defined everything that followed. "All ships attack pattern chaos. Do not follow predetermined routes. Do not maintain formation. Fight like humans." What happened next violated every principle of space combat that the watching delegates understood. Instead of the careful formations and coordinated attacks they expected, the human fleet exploded outward like fragments from a bomb. Each ship moved independently, following no pattern that alien minds could recognize or predict. The Devourer response was immediate and telling. Their ships, which had easily countered every Federation tactic, hesitated. For crucial seconds they seemed confused by the apparent randomness of the human assault. They tried to apply their learned patterns to predict human movement, but there were no patterns to learn. Delegate Morthex of the Spiral Commonwealth leaned forward in his seat as he watched Commander Subin's destroyer Guangzhou drop out of hyperspace directly into a formation of Devourer scouts. Her ship was already firing before it fully materialized, her weapons trained on targets she should not have been able to see yet. How did she know where to aim? Morthex whispered to the delegate beside him. Dr. Sora answered from her position, near the projector. She did not know. She guessed based on instinct and experience. Human pilots learn to fire at where targets will be, not where they are. It is not logical, but it works. The footage continued, showing battle scenes that made seasoned military officers of a dozen species shift uncomfortably in their seats. They watched human pilots ram their fighters into Devourer vessels 10 times their size, not as last desperate acts, but as planned tactics. They saw Marine units led by Major Haywan fighting through alien corridors with weapons that looked centuries out of date, projectile firearms, explosive charges, and metal blades that could cut through energy shields by pure mechanical force. The most disturbing scene for the alien delegates came when pilot Jinsu flew his fighter directly into the Devourer psychic broadcaster. They watched him endure mental assaults that had driven entire alien crews insane. His face twisted with pain, but his hands steady on the controls. When his ship disintegrated against the alien construct, several delegates made sounds of horror. The psychic attack should have paralyzed him, Grexthar said, his massive frame leaning forward. How did he function under that mental assault? Commander Taejin's voice was calm as he answered. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Our minds learned to function despite pain, fear, and chaos. What you call mental assault, we call Tuesday afternoon. The footage showed the battle's turning point when Captain Sion Ho made his impossible decision. The delegates watched his heavy cruiser Pusan surrounded by Devourer ships, its hull cracking under concentrated fire. According to all military doctrine, he should have retreated or surrendered. Instead, he deliberately overloaded his reactor while surrounded by enemies. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. It should have been suicide, but somehow the Pusan's crew survived in escape pods that launched just before the detonation. The unstable wormhole created by the overloading reactor tore through the Devourer command formation, like a blade through silk. Silvara from the Nexus Union floated in her water bubble, her tentacles moving in agitation. That maneuver should be impossible. No rational commander would attempt deliberate reactor overload while surrounded by enemies. Rational commanders lose wars, Yunki said simply. Human commanders win them. The final scenes of the footage showed the aftermath of the battle. Devourer ships drifting dead in space, their hulls cracked and bleeding the energy they had stolen from consumed worlds. The massive command construct that had coordinated their attacks floated silent and dark, its psychic broadcasts replaced by the emptiness of death. For the first time since the Void War began, a Devourer fleet had been completely destroyed. But it was not the victory itself that silenced the watching delegates. It was the cost. The human fleet had suffered 60% casualties, losses that would have been considered catastrophic by Federation standards. Yet in the final frames of the footage, the surviving human crews were not mourning their dead or treating their wounded. They were already preparing for the next battle, repairing their ships and redistributing personnel with the grim efficiency of a species that had learned to endure the unendurable. The footage ended, and the lights returned to normal. The Great Why? Hall remained absolutely silent for long minutes as delegates struggled to process what they had seen. These were beings from species that valued logic, efficiency, and the preservation of life above all else. They had just watched humans treat catastrophic casualties as acceptable losses in pursuit of total victory. High Counselor Velnara was the first to speak. The tactical analysis reports indicate that human forces achieved a complete victory, despite being significantly outnumbered and outgunned. Federation observers confirmed that the Devourer fleet was eliminated entirely, with no survivors to carry intelligence back to the main enemy force. Admiral Grixton stood slowly, his injuries from earlier battles still visible. In 3 months of warfare, the Federation lost 14 major fleets and suffered over 2 million casualties without achieving a single decisive victory. The human force accomplished more in 14 hours than we did in 90 days. Grexthar, the massive Vorthak warrior who had once mocked human violence, struggled to his feet. "I called you primitive and violent," he said, looking directly at Hyun-Ki. "I was right about both things, but I was wrong about what those things meant. Your primitiveness is not weakness. It is freedom from the logical patterns that the devourers exploit. Your violence is not barbarism. It is the willingness to pay any price for victory." A small crystalline being from the Xerion Collective chimed softly. "Our hive minds seek harmony and order. Your individual minds embrace chaos and contradiction. We thought this made you inferior. Instead, it makes you immune to the attacks that have destroyed our fleets." Dr. Ji-Hyun stepped forward from her position in the human delegation. "The devourers feed on predictable thought patterns," she explained to the assembled delegates. "Every species in this room thinks in organized, logical ways that can be analyzed and countered. Human thinking is naturally chaotic because we evolved in an environment where logic alone was not enough for survival. We learned to make decisions based on instinct, emotion, and pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat." Delegate Torbeth from a small Rimworld species raised a tentacle. "Are you saying that madness is strength?" "We are saying that controlled madness is a weapon," Commander Taejin replied. "Humans are not insane. We are unpredictable. There is a difference, and that difference is what allowed us to defeat an enemy that consumed your logic." The debate that followed was unlike any in the Council's history. Delegates who had spent centuries refining their logical thought processes now questioned whether logic itself was a liability. Species that had built civilizations on order and predictability faced the possibility that chaos and unpredictability were necessary for survival. Ambassador Hyun-Ki let the discussion continue for over an hour before he stepped forward. The hall gradually fell silent as delegates remembered why they were there. The footage had not just shown a Beta or V,